Hi, my name is Amy Williams. I am the hope dealer to the dope dealer from Chicago, and excited to be here today to talk about a topic that we really don't discuss much. I do gang intervention, and I have the privilege of working with young people in and out of the prison system. And many of you know the work that I'm called to in the city that I'm called to. There's a whole lot of violence and a lot of death. And we don't seem to talk about the issue of grief. And not just dealing and helping our young people with grief, but also how do we as leaders navigate that grief when we're also trying to help others through the process. And so I'm going to tell you the reason why they call Chicago Chirac. And it's not because Chief Keef came up with the song. It's literally because between the year of 2000 and 2012, there were more homicides in the city of Chicago than there were in Iraq. Iraq had 2,200. We had 5,500 in the exact same time period. And Chicago is not unique to death, to homicide, to violence, and even to young people who are committing suicide or who are dying at a young age of things like cancer or any other kind of illness or sickness. But there's one thing that we all have in common, and that is how loss takes a really deep and heavy toll on our communities, the families in those communities, and us as youth workers. Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And we love to talk about the rejoicing part, but the mourning part, we just kind of want to leave that for somebody else. But I have a very wise mentor who once told me in my time of grief that grief, it waits for you. You can deal with grief and take it head on now, or 10 years later, it's going to come. At some point, you are going to have to deal with grief. And so how do we navigate that when our young people are hurting? How do we navigate that when we have loss? Right now, I'm reminded that in the last 5 years, I've buried 11 of my young people, and I buried 4 of them within a year. And one of them was my cousin in my grandmother's house. I know many people who have buried many more young people, but grief is grief. Pain is pain. And we all have to figure out how to navigate that, especially when there are questions of why. One of my young people, we actually got him out of the gang, and he was living this incredible life, and he wanted to be a man of God, and he was a daddy to a 1-year-old. And then helping one of his friends, he actually got killed in a drive-by. And while I'm in the process of trying to help the young people around him and his family members grieving, it was almost like I had to put a mask up for myself in order to just get through it. But I was so blessed to have an incredible community of support around me. You see, what we have to understand is that everybody experiences grief differently. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. But there are ways that our intentions, our motives are to help. But really, sometimes the way that we help young people process their grief is actually quite harmful. And so there are a couple of tips that I would like to share with you that I learned the hard way, not only by doing it wrong, but because the way that I was also helped through the grieving process really was more hurtful than it was helpful. So I would like to share with you 6 things to never say to somebody who is grieving. Number 1, so how are you doing? Well, when somebody asks me that question, I automatically want to say, how do you think I'm doing? When they're going through loss, really probably the best thing that you can say is, I know that you're really suffering right now. Acknowledge where they are, acknowledge their pain. Don't ask somebody how they're doing when they've just lost somebody. Number 2, but we hear it all the time. Well, they're in a better place. Like, I understand that we're trying to be helpful and we're trying to be useful and comforting, But saying to someone who just lost somebody, they are in a better place, yeah, that doesn't do it. The best thing that you can do is say, I know that you really miss them. You must be hurting. The third thing that you should never say to somebody who's grieving is, please let me know if there's anything that I can do for you. Now, I know that that's something that as Christians we just automatically say anyway, but let's think about this. When I'm grieving, I don't even know what I want or what I need. The best thing you can do when someone's grieving, instead of saying, let me know, is to offer what you're going to do. I will bring meals to you 3 times during the week. Or can I come over and do a load of laundry for you, or do your sheets, or like offer concrete things that you're going to do for them instead of asking them. Because honestly, they're just trying to get through the process. They don't even know what they need. The fourth thing that you should not say to somebody who's grieving is, I know how you feel. Surely you may have a very similar experience, but no two grief experiences are the same. You can say, I can't even imagine how you feel right now. And that gives it a little bit more validity to what they're feeling. The fifth thing that you should never say to somebody who's grieving is, well, this happens eventually. Death is a part of life. Instead, you can say, I know that you're suffering and you must really miss them. Tell me something about them. Never equate it or just kind of brush it off to, well, this happens. That's not helpful. That's very hurtful. And then the sixth thing, well, it really comes down to sometimes people think that you just shouldn't say anything at all. So in that moment, that could be where you bring up something and be like, remember the time when, or tell me something about. But sometimes just sitting in silence is not only awkward for you, but it's incredibly uncomfortable for the person that is grieving. So just have them relive a very happy moment in which you can maybe bring a little bit of joy and laughter. Now, I have a story of one of my young people who died in a gang fight one early morning, 2 days after his mother had just died of cancer. And he was the glue that held our block together. And so we were all hanging around outside, as you kind of do, and everybody was out there smoking kush and drinking and just trying to numb themselves. And I remember I was sitting with a couple of my boys, and a new kid that I had never met, actually, they were smoking kush next to me. And trust me, I was praying that I would not get a contact. I was praying God was faithful. I did not get a contact. But I was praying, and this young boy was just passing it around. And he looked at me, and he was like, you want some of this? And one of my young people was like, she's a pastor. You don't do that. You don't ask her to do something like that. And he was like, for real? I can't believe I'm smoking next to a pastor. And he's like, but what are you doing here? And then the young man was like, this is Miss Amy. She's always here for us. Even in situations that you don't think she'd be in, man, she's the real deal. Like, she just accepts us exactly as we are, where we are. And he just could not grasp it or understand it. Later on, as I'm just kind of walking around and being present with some of the other guys, he comes up to me and he's like, I still can't believe that you're here with us. We're out here drinking and smoking and talking about Kikito and how we're going to get revenge. And you as a pastor, like, you're out here? I've never seen that before. Why would you be out here? And I said, why wouldn't I be? I loved Kikito as much as you did. And you're not the only ones that are grieving, but I'm grieving, and I need you guys as well to help me through this. Now, I might not smoke kush, but a hug here and there, a smile, and a memory talking about him, that helps me through the process. And I think a lot of time as we go through grief and we go through the process as youth workers, we think that we have to be the savior, we have to fix and we can heal. But I found that a lot of my healing was done together with the same young people who were grieving the same young person that I was grieving as well. I think one of the biggest things that we can do as youth workers to help our young people through the process is just our presence. Don't try to fix it. Don't come at it with any cliches. Just be present. Pray. Look for where you can offer words of encouragement. Look for where you can offer hugs. Look where you can just sit and hold their hand. Cry with them. Let them cry on your shoulder. Sometimes just a rub on the back. I just walked up and down the street. Kids would just come to me looking for a hug, looking for a word of encouragement, looking for prayer. Presence, I think, is the key to really helping young people through the process. But I also know this one thing, and I will close with this thought. When somebody grieves and somebody passes away, it seems that everybody's there for the funeral. Everybody's there for the burial. And then everybody goes home. They go back to their life. And our young people and their families are left to still process their grief. I think that is one of the most powerful times that you can be there, is after everybody goes home. After the meals, 3 weeks later, you're still bringing meals. You're still visiting. A month later, you're still laughing. 2 months later, you're going to the gravesite with them. 6 months later, you continue the process. Grief is a process. Acknowledge it, understand it, see where they are, validate where they are, whether they're in the anger, they're in the denial phase. But grief is not just during the funeral, definitely not just during the burial. But it is a process that you continue to walk through with young people. And I think through that, there's healing. And one of the most encouraging scriptures that I share with my young people is the fact that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. I always acknowledge, even if my kids do not know the Lord, that the Lord is close to you because his heart is broken. Because your heart is broken. And even if you're not there, just know that I'm praying for you and that I will be here for you when you're ready to have those conversations. Youth ministry is tough. Working in the city is tough. You're going to have loss. You're going to experience grief. If anything, I just want to encourage you to walk through the process. Help young people to go through that process, but please do not neglect your right to go through the process. Surround yourself with people and family that can allow you to also be vulnerable and heal as you're helping your young people heal. Yeah, it is a necessary part of life. We are going to go through that, but we can go through it together.